Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today for another edition of AirWAVs podcast. My name is Zach Hubeck. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing with Wave LLC, and I am your crew chief, guiding all of us through our new campaign called the Funding Cup 500. And today I have Erica from CommScope Ruckus and Chris from the Grants Office. And today we're going to really navigate through COVID relief funding, some of the federal grants that are out there to help connect the underserved and unserved. And for the folks that are listening on the line who are partners at CommScope Ruckus and even end users, this big federal stimulus in these grant programs can be very, very dizzying. And the purpose of today is to educate you and let you know you are very well supported. And we've got experts in the virtual room here who can help us navigate these things. So I say welcome to Chris and Erica. How are you both today?
Doing
Doing well.
fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Well, I've introduced myself. Why don't we go ladies first? Erica, who are you? Who do you work for? And what is your role?
Thanks, Zach. I'm Erica Perkins. I am with CommScope Ruckus, and I am on the sales acceleration team as a business development manager.
Very cool. Chris, who are you?
Christopher LaPage. I'm Manager of Research and Consultation with Grants Office, LLC.
All right, very cool. Well, why don't we bounce back to Erica, the sales acceleration team. This sounds awesome. Why don't you tell the folks at home for CommScope Ruckus, who is the sales acceleration team and how do you guys help partners out?
Yes. So I'm part of the sales acceleration team supporting the Americas region. There's 3 of us. It's myself, Thomas Schwab, and Jorge Atencio. And we're responsible for the transformation of our sales and partner communities aligned to the strategic growth areas of the business. So we lead the evolution of sales strategies to penetrate target markets, expand the business, and there's a lot more responsibilities under all of that, from analyzing the market, identifying customer and partner trends, and providing recommendations and launching strategic initiatives like this one.
Very cool. Well, good. Well, I think the program playing on The Bark is Back and with CommScope Ruckus talking about, I believe you guys are calling it the Fetch program. Is that correct?
Yes, Ruckus Fetch.
All right. And so the Ruckus Fetch program, what is that all about, Erica?
Yeah, there's 2 main elements to the program. The first one's really enabling our sellers and partners through a series of trainings to first understand the IT and market opportunities offered through the COVID stimulus bills, and then 2, have the tools and resources available to them to have the conversation around funding programs with their customers. And then the second element's really customer facing. It's all around the Ruckus Funding Support Program, which is free, no obligation consulting services offered to our public sector, healthcare, transportation entities out there. And it's really designed to enable our partners so they can help their current and future clients find, secure, and use funding for their network infrastructure.
Really cool. So I'm envisioning, CommScope Ruckus, you've got your solution providers, your service providers, and then you've got end users, and you guys are encapsulating all of these programs and helping support everybody up and down in the channel. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we're currently focusing only on enabling our CommScope Ruckus partners
Okay.
today, enabling them with these program tools and resources, but we are open to having conversations and discussions and partnering with those outside of the CommScope Ruckus partner community.
All right. Very cool. Well, Chris, you're up, sir. So tell me about the grants office. What is your role in this this funding cup we're talking about today? A lot of federal stimulus to connect people with technology. How does the grants office help in this equation?
Yeah, thanks, Zach. So if Zach is the crew chief here, we're sort of the folks Zach would go to say, we need new tires. How are we going to pay for this? How are we going to pay for that? That's really the role we play. We are the subject matter experts. We have over a 20-year history of providing grants intelligence to public sector agencies and organizations when it comes to connecting their technology-rich projects to grant funding that's available and we do that on an international basis. So we have a lot of expertise. I manage our research and consultation arm. I also directly consult in the healthcare space, but we have folks across the spectrum for K through 12, higher ed, healthcare, state and local government. We have subject matter experts that can make sure not just that, where's the funding and how to access it, but outside of stimulus funding, a lot of times it comes down to how you're justifying that technology, connecting the dots so that it becomes fundable. And so we sort of provide that consultation and hopefully connect the dots for folks.
Very cool. This is awesome. So really when COVID hit in March 2020, some would argue it was before that, the federal government stepped up and said, we have, historically it's been called the digital divide. And it really exposed our nation. And actually it was, in my opinion, my humble 2 cents, national crisis. You have shelter in place orders from the government where kids need to do their e-learning from home. You have people that are trying to conduct business and do, keep the economy moving. And there's a lot of people in the world that are unserved and underserved, specifically in the United States we're talking about today. Chris, question for you. As far as stimulus money from these COVID relief bills, where do you feel the most, or where do you see most of the money is being appropriated today to help that cause?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I think it really, if you look at it from a holistic perspective, there's a lot of things in these stimulus packages that are for individuals in terms of getting support when it comes to unemployment and so forth. When it comes to these projects and to the public sector, though, you're really looking at a big bunch of funds going to state and local governments, in particular, deal with this, not only special money for the public health component side of it, but the overall response in terms of how folks have had these unexpected costs when it comes to PPE, remote work from home, and all these new problems, if you will, that folks are dealing with really at a major scale. So you have a lot of funding going to state and local government. We saw $150 billion for the Coronavirus Relief Fund back with the CARES Act, which is the original stimulus legislation that was signed in March of last year. We just saw another $350 billion pumped into coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds that will help some of these state and local governments overcome some of the issues they're having here with lost revenue from this pandemic. All phases of the stimulus packages have had funds for K through 12 and institutions of higher education as well. That includes both public schools, whether they be charter and even parochial and not-for-profit schools. In the latest couple of rounds of relief, we've seen funding going in that direction. So, K through 12, higher ed, state and local government, and certainly healthcare as well. Between all the different stimulus packages, there's $186.5 billion put into an HHS provider relief fund to help healthcare providers across the public sector, not-for-profit, and even for-profit healthcare providers overcome sort of this surge in terms of telemedicine, remote work from home, clinicians trying to be able to join their network and see patients or do activities from a variety of settings other than their traditional office.
Very cool. Well, good. Well, that is, that's a lot of information about where the funds are appropriated. We'll get into some of the acronyms in a little bit, but why don't I bounce back to Erica real quick and the sales acceleration team. So you've got resellers or integrators who may have some end users that may be eligible for these stimulus funds. How does the sales acceleration team help them, and what kind of forms exist? What's the process if they feel there's a project that's appropriate for these types of funds? How do they get started?
Yeah, absolutely. First step, if they don't have an identified CommScope Ruckus reseller or sales rep, we have an alias that's really easy to use. That's public-funding-support@commscope.com, and that's a mailbox that's managed by the sales acceleration team. So oftentimes we'll get a lot of those raw leads, as you will, come in that they don't know where to start. Maybe they visited our microsite and they just want some questions answered. And then there's really two paths they can take from there. If they have a specific funding source they have a question about, or they just want to know how much is remaining, or how do they apply, we can leverage Chris LaPage's services at Grants office to get an answer back to them, usually within a 24-hour period. But if there's deeper research required, within 24 hours, we'll get assigned a consultant for the project, and then they'll give us an estimated time of delivery for the answer. So it's really quick turnaround time, and they get really into specifics, and from there can have one-on-one consultative calls, all of this free, to help them navigate that process and get more questions answered. For those that have large projects and a lot of it's around this digital divide and enabling that remote work environment, if they just need to find funding somewhere and they don't know where, that's when we suggest they do a custom funding opportunity report. And that's a true value add service from Grants office. We've gotten lots of positive responses from our customers on leveraging that service. And to get started on that, it's really simple. The partners have access to this one-page document. It's really just to collect the bare minimum information required to pull the right types of funding sources for the customer. So it's going to be, they have to identify who they're working with at CommScope Ruckus, but mostly it's about, what's the IT project, where's their location, what's their funding needs, and what's the challenge that they're solving with this IT project. And that really gives Grants office the starting point to pull a comprehensive report for that customer. And they'll pull everything from COVID-19 relief funds and all of the substreams below it, how much they've been awarded, and or maybe how much have they spent if that's been posted. And then it also pulls in all the associated grants as well, grant opportunities specific to their location, the type of industry the business is in, and the IT project. And I mean, I've seen these documents, they're so comprehensive with summaries and where to go and next steps. It's very impressive. And they can be very comprehensive, as in like 45 to over 80 pages long. And so we'll also help the customer schedule follow-up consultative calls with Grants office and their CommScope Ruckus reseller or sales rep, so that Grants office and their consultants can help prioritize with them which funding source makes the best sense to go after.
Awesome. And with Chris and his team having over 20 years experience, I mean, they're able to navigate it. Let me just rifle off some acronyms here. We have CAF, which is the Connect America Fund, RDOF, which is the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, and I've saved the most syllabic for last, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. Phew! I just got that out, just barely. But the federal government, they love their acronyms. They love the multi-syllabic grant forms. And what's really cool, and what I heard there, Erica, use this team together, because there's a one-pager that I've seen, and we'll post it up here. You guys can see that as an example. The form that Erica's talking about is help me identify the opportunity, and let's engage Chris and his team, and they can navigate, this is the appropriate fund for that, or maybe even there's a custom opportunity there. So we're hopefully making it super, super simple for the partner and digestible, if you will. And you guys are doing some great work there. So I tip my cap to you. If I could take these headphones off, I'd tip the cap for sure. All right, cool. Let's go down market a little bit here. Chris, question for you, sir. How do you know if an end user is a good candidate for a grant? And then what do you need to know for that? Or what do those end users need to know? Do I qualify for this?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And there's also a couple different types of grants that are out there when we're talking about stimulus funds, traditional, what we call annual grant programs. The biggest thing to look at is first, particularly for the audience here, as you go to look for customers that might, benefit from this program and from this type of expertise and connecting the dots that we do. Obviously, the top recipients are public sector agencies. We've talked about state and local governments, K through 12 school districts, charter schools, institutions of higher education, public or not-for-profit healthcare providers. So, the biggest thing is identifying the right type of customer in that regard. But then when you actually get down to evaluating the customer itself, it's the big thing to find out is, do they have funding to pay for the project, right? So if they actually have a budget or have the funds on hand to obviously pay for these things, you don't want to necessarily introduce grants into the equation to slow the process down. Most of these stimulus funds require that you haven't budgeted for the items that you're looking for, that it was sort of a popped up or needed to be expanded network for telemedicine or for distance learning because of the pandemic. So the big thing is finding out whether they already have a budget for it. And so for those folks that don't have a budget or only a partial budget, those are really the candidates to really look into in terms of moving forward. In terms of their needs, what purchases do they plan on making? Are they longer term purchases? Can they be considered emergency purchases as well? Can they be connected back to the pandemic, obviously, and the things that were necessary there? But first and foremost, is the right type of customer. Do they have a budget for the project? And grants office and our team here can flesh out really the rest of that equation in terms of what grants are out there for that particular customer. When we have the follow-up call, we can dive into why this might be a bit of a more low-hanging fruit for this customer, while this customer really needs to pursue these opportunities over here for one reason or another. So the other thing to look at are for projects that impact the constituency that agency serves. So if it's residents, students, patients, that's a big thing to look at as well. The closer we can bring the technology to impacting patients, distance learning for students, telemedicine for patients, for constituents, being able to connect with constituents in a particular locality or state, even when it comes to vaccine availability, distribution, all these type of things. So, but yeah, first and foremost, just making sure it's a sort of a public sector agency like we've discussed, and whether they have a budget for the project.
Yeah, telemedicine is huge. I mean, with COVID, for the first time, you heard health officials say, don't come to the hospital unless this is dire. And you have people at home who don't have internet connectivity, and they still need to receive healthcare for their standard. I have high blood pressure, I have heart disease, I have this, I have that. Those folks still needed to get treated. And it's good to see that these programs are out there for folks. Chris, another question for you. And when I think K through 12, I automatically think E-rate programs. So if someone is already taking advantage of an annual E-rate program, does that make them ineligible for some of the stimulus funds we're talking about today? Or can multiple funds be leveraged in parallel with each other?
No, yeah, that's a great question, and absolutely. So the big rule of thumb when it comes to federal funding, regardless of how you originally receive it, stimulus funding, a traditional grant program, is that you just can't use the same pot of money to fund the same items. So essentially, you charge, you buy some routers and switches, and then you charge them to two different grants. So essentially, you're pocketing, right, half of that pull you're pocketing. That's the only type of thing that's really disallowed. If you have multiple components to a project and you're using different pots of federal money to fund different elements and different items from that project, you're absolutely able to do that. So if you're able to take advantage of E-rate with some of the telecommunication costs, for instance, that pop up, you can certainly pursue these other funds for distance learning and some of the equipment and other things you would need in that. And in fact, the America Rescue Plan, I believe, included additional funds for E-rate this time around, recognizing that digital divide. But yeah, you absolutely can be used in tandem with each other.
All right, beautiful. Good. Well, let's go back to Erica. Erica, question for you. So if folks have not necessarily become a CommScope Ruckus partner today and they want more information on this, is this information from your team only available to Ruckus partners, or is there ability for non-partners to have access to this information as well?
Yeah, so as I stated earlier, it's only been rolled out and enabled to our CommScope Ruckus resellers. Again, more than happy to have those discussions with those partners that are interested and get the partnership discussed. but it is currently exclusive for the CommScope company as a whole.
Very good. And I think, barrier to entry and getting signed up and committed to becoming a CommScope partner. We've been a Ruckus distributor for over 11 years now, and that barrier to entry is to get signed up is very minimal. So I encourage folks, please do get signed up as a partner, and then we can start this process rolling. So let's play out a scenario, and either of you can take this question. So let's say we've got an end user who knows, hey, I would like to apply for these funds, and we have a reseller or an integrator who might be a smaller shop, a 2 or 3 man shop, who has the technical capability and aptitude to help this end user deploy technology. But that reseller or integrator may not necessarily have the business acumen or chops to navigate some of these forms and these programs. What is the process for them, and how can either of you help them navigate that specifically? How do they get started, and what, if you haven't mentioned it yet, how do they get that process started, and how can either of you help them? Who wants to take that one?
I'll take that one. It's something I see every day. So I'd recommend the CommScope Ruckus reseller reach out to the public-funding-support alias or their Ruckus partner account manager, and they can engage us as well as needed. If they haven't already, our partner account managers can run them through our Ruckus Funding Support Program partner briefing, give them an in-depth review of kind of all the offerings that this program entails and see which path makes the best sense for this current project and customer. If that's already been done, then they probably would want a custom funding opportunity report. So we would educate the partner on where they can get access to that document. If they have questions around it, we can assist with that as well. They'll work with their customer in completing that form and getting that back to the Ruckus PAM or the sales acceleration team. And then we will relay back to the partner as soon as a grants office consultant is assigned to the project, who that consultant is, and that's within 24 hours. And then engage, as I already described, kind of how that process goes along in follow-up consultative calls and providing that funding report, educating them on when we're ready to have that consultative call, which type of representation we need from the customer in that call to make it more successful and productive, such as having grant writers, anyone on their staff available that has that kind of experience to sit in on the call, as well as a financial decision maker that kind of has the history and power around the COVID funding and what's being budgeted and what's already pretty much pre-obligated for those funds. And then we'll join them on that call as well.
Very good. Well, let me ask this question. That was a very good answer. The one thing I am curious about, and I'm sure the folks at home are curious about, from start to finish, you've identified an opportunity with an end user. They seem like they're eligible for a certain stimulus or grant program. From start to finish, when you start the process, the grant is written, and then the technology is deployed. Chris or Erica, can you put your thumb on it's approximately this amount of time, or is that a difficult question for you to answer?
Yeah, Erica, I'll start here first. You could chime in certainly if you have anything to add, but I think it depends on a number of pieces. So there's really two tracks I like to talk about. Traditional annual grant programming. The federal government puts out 1.4 trillion in discretionary spending through their annual regular budget every year. A decent 500-600 billion of that goes out for public sector projects, and we connect folks to those grants to make that happen. These type of grants typically have very formalized procedures, and so you may engage with a team, and the perfect opportunity could be a couple months away even from being announced. But once it's announced, you typically have 4 to 8 weeks to apply. Then you have could be 3-4 months before a decision's made, and you actually start to draw down funds. That process takes a bit longer. It's a slower burn, and certainly great for folks who don't have the funding. But with these stimulus funds, the whole idea is to get those funds out there as quick as possible. So what they tend to do is leverage existing funding vehicles. So we pushed out this funding for vaccines or for other types of activities to states last year. We're just going to issue supplemental awards through this program and make that happen so the funding goes out quickly. And then a lot of the funding has to be made available, within 3 weeks to within a couple months of that stimulus bill being passed. So sometimes the funds are actually already available in bank accounts sitting on the customer site, and they just have to figure out internally how they're going to spend those dollars. And so that there doesn't have to be a long lag. There may not even be a complicated set of forms or applications for them to fill out. They just have to keep in mind at the back end when they're reporting what the justification looks like. So for stimulus funding, you can literally identify a customer today, and they happen to have the money available on site. They haven't spent it. And you can move to them funding their project within, days to weeks, on the scale what we see with the stimulus funding. So it does vary quite a bit, but now's the time to really be hitting the pavement, because you can get much quicker turnaround times than you will with just traditional grants.
I think last year we saw from, if I looked at a replay 2020, and I look at our CommScope Ruckus partners and what they were able to accomplish, there's a lot of schools that were leveraging an E-rate program, and then they found out, well, mom and dad can't afford internet at home, so what do we do? And what they did is leverage a lot of CommScope Ruckus technology, and they would deploy a parking lot hotspot. So those children, now their parents can't afford technology at home or connectivity, wireless internet service. So they would be able to drive to the school and the parking lot, and those children would be able to do their work. And a lot of that was driven by some CARES Act funding and things like that. So it was really cool to see how quickly and efficiently our CommScope Ruckus partners could react to that and get those stimulus funds as well. So it's really cool to see that trend is going to continue with these other programs. Awesome. Very cool. Erica, anything to add in that capacity as far as timing and other things? Chris was pretty thorough there. Go ahead, though.
Yeah, the front end, as they identify whether they're going to pursue the emergency COVID relief funds or the grant funds, usually will be about a 2-week process to getting that form, the funding report out, and a follow-up consultative call to then decide which funding source they plan to pursue.
Got it. Cool. Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about other tools, and then we can wrap after this question. So, Erica, question over to you. The sales acceleration team, obviously, we're bringing education to the forefront. We're doing this podcast today. There's been some webinars. Is there anything coming up here in the next couple of months people should really be paying attention to as far as a webinar series or a training you guys are offering? What do you have for us?
Yeah, we are launching a monthly partner webinar series. So some of the future topics are still to be determined, but end of April, there'll be another one. So it's the Fetch the Funds webinar series. April is going to be all around E-rate and COVID stimulus relief funding and identifying, what's the difference and how they complement each other. So stay tuned for that. There'll also be a customer webinar with similar topics and themes.
Awesome.
And as we roll out more tools and resources, they'll all be available on the Ruckus Partner Portal, the Ruckus Fetch page, which is under resources. So we have customer-facing presentations that you can put your logo on and help drive those conversations with your customers. You can find all the forms, and we'll be publishing additional kind of guides around the stimulus funds that are coming out and how customers can leverage them.
Very cool. Chris, anything for folks to pay attention from the grants office perspective? Is there any tools or assets you guys have on your website or training regimens or programs that you guys have that people should be paying attention to as well?
Yeah, so at Grants Office, we have a lot of free resources that are available to the public. We do a quarterly newsletter called Funded, FUNDED, that talks about funding that's available across all those sectors to help folks out. We also put on a variety of webcasts and other offerings to the public that can all be seen from either grantsoffice.com or grantsoffice.info. But yeah, in general, though, I just encourage folks to, with what Erica said there, there's generally speaking, 1.4 trillion, as I mentioned, in discretionary spending each year in the annual budget. Between the various stimulus packages we've seen over the last 12 months, there's 6 trillion extra dollars across all those packages. Most folks refer to three: CARES, that CRRSAA one you mentioned, the American Rescue Plan that just passed, but there were a couple other smaller ones in between those that really come out to about $6 trillion. So, I mean, this is you really want to take advantage of this and set yourself up for the future, because things like telemedicine, I think, are going to be synonymous with healthcare moving forward. So while this pandemic has started a trend or helped folks really get immersed in some of these things, it's going to be something that you're going to need the framework and the network and the capacity to do these projects moving forward indefinitely, and in preparation for future events that could occur.
Awesome. Erica noted Chris did not want to say Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. I can't blame you, sir. I can't blame you. Well, Erica and Chris, this has been awesome. Really, if people just take away one thing from today's session, I hope it's that CommScope Ruckus and the Grants Office and WAVE, we're here to help simplify things. There is so much to navigate. Leverage your network, leverage the tools around you, and let's continue to deliver rock solid technology from CommScope Ruckus to connect people to the internet and to connect people to their jobs and their homes and their doctors. And let's help these folks make it simple. And Chris, thank you for all the work you're doing over at the Grants Office to help these folks. We're doing yeoman's work here and trying to connect America and during these really, really strange times. So it's awesome to have you both. Thank you for joining me for the Funding Cup 500 podcast, and we will catch you guys next time. Thanks.
Thank you.